Alright, in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how to prepare scenes for the various render passes. Now, this is naturally multiple steps. The document I provided should give you some of the specifics, but this is the overall process and how everything takes place. So, this particular scene is Anna's meeting moved clip, so shot 10. It's nicely animated, and so basically, as you can see, we have Wesley moving, but the only other things moving are the fork and the plate, and this is something we need to make note of for later. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to a perspective view and get a nice vantage point. Okay, now these scenes are fairly large, and whenever it goes to save them, it'll take a little while. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to update some paths. So if we go to the top left of the screen, References, Asset Tracking, they'll bring up a list of textures currently used by the scene. So we want to select all these with character in front of it, go up to Paths, Set Path, and the path that we need is back, back, assets, character, and then texture. Click on that, thanks for a minute, and if you typed it in correctly, you'll see all of these are found. Alright, now from here, what we need to do is we need to open up our layer manager. This layer manager, I'm just docking it over here so it's easier to see. You'll see that quite a few layers are frozen, a couple are hidden, and so forth. What we need to do is we need to go over to the display panel, go down to the freeze section, and unfreeze all. Now we need to hide the objects that we want to keep. Okay, because we're going to be going through and replacing the environment. Okay, so primarily we want to hide Wesley in this case. Now if we select the garage and or pretty much all of the environment, click on the Select Objects tool, and then go through and deselect by holding down Alt anything we want to keep. So in this case, it is the fork and plate. Once we've done that, we hit delete to remove everything else. And we'll take this and move it out of the way. Now what we need to do is we need to prepare these, since we don't want to basically reanimate all this stuff. What we want to do is we just want to import the new plate with the scrambled eggs and an updated fork and align them to these various objects. Now these wouldn't be necessary if we had all of our props ready to go right from the beginning. So what we're going to do is we're going to select both of these, go up to Tools, Rename, and I've been calling these fork, plate, go down to underscore, and then go down to numbered and click rename. I'll now select the individual fork and do REF fork, and then for the plate, REF plate. Now the reason why we're doing this is when we merge in the other scene that also has a plate that also has a fork, and we don't want to add to any confusion. Now with both of these guys selected in our layer manager, we create a new layer. And I've been calling this Xform Ref. We make sure that it is not renderable by turning off the little teapot. Then we move this out of the way. Okay, now at this point, we go up to top left of the screen, import, merge. We bring in the environment. Hide the cameras, and then select all. It'll think for a little bit, and then it'll ask you what materials do you want to use. We want to merge, or we want to use the merged materials because those have been updated as well. Alright, so there we go. We now have a new scene in here, but with the old plate. Now what we need to do is we need to grab those plates that are currently sitting in the kitchen on the counter and line them up. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our select tool, hit H on the keyboard, or use the select by name. And for the first one, we're going to just type in star fork to get us to the prop fork object. We click on align, hit H again, and this time we want to type in REF to take us to our reference fork. Make sure that XYZ is on, center is on, and then XYZ for orientation is on. Alright, so now you'll notice that it's backwards. So we want to rotate this around 180 degrees using the local axis. It's still not quite there. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to line that up. Alright, so what we want to do is we just want to rotate this and line it up. Every scene seems to be a little bit different. They seem to be working off of different forks and different orientations. So we just want to line it up fairly close. Now we want to go over to the link tool, click on that, hit H again, type in REF, and go down to REF fork. Now, anytime that fork moves, our new one will move with it. This new fork is necessary for proper hatch effect. Alright, so now let's repeat the same for the plate. Let's go over to selection, hit H. This time we're going to type in breakfast. Grab that, go over to the align tool, click on the plate, or hit H and select the plate. Same settings as before. Oops. Let's make sure we click on the plate so everything lines up. Bring this up so this one's easier to adjust. Go over to link, hit H, type in REF, go down to ref plate, click on link. Now what we can do is we can hide our Xform Ref layer, and as you can see that everything is moving along with it. If we now unhide our character, so I'm gonna unhide casual face objects in common. We can check to make sure that everything is lining up, fingers and so forth. Alright, So that is step one. We have new environment and new props. Now on for step two. So let's go through and make sure that the character himself is all set up. So we select the torso. Notice Turbo Smooth is off. We need that on. Iterations to 0. Rendering iterations to 1. Go over to the hands. Same thing. Go to the face. Drop the iterations. And that one's good. Alright, so that should be it. Alright, now for step 3. We're now going to set up our renderer. So if we go to the render options in the upper right hand corner of the screen, or hit F10 on the keyboard, we want to make sure that we're HDTV. Before rendering, we'll always set it to 1920, but for testing, I use the 481. Go over to V-Ray, underneath the image sampler, turn off anti-aliasing filter, set the min rate to -3, turn on object outline, turn on normal threshold. Go over to settings, turn off V-Ray log. That'll just prevent a little dialog box from constantly popping up. Now at this point, we want to do a test render, just to make sure that all of our colors and everything else are showing up. So looks good. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to load the script that I wrote. So if we go up to Max Script, click on Run Script, and inside of the Production Assets Other folder, click on Utility Scene Setup. Click Open, and you get this little dialog box. This will make it a little bit easier for everything else that we need to do. For starters, we can make sure that all of the self-illuminations are consistent at 50%. This is a good time to save it. So we go to the upper left hand corner of the screen, Save As, and put it in the main directory outside of the submissions directory. Keep the name the same. Alright, so it's thinking a little bit. Alright, now from this point on, we're going to be setting up our render passes. And this shouldn't take very long. The majority of the time is spent up until this point. And the only time that you're going to have to spend a lot of additional time is if you find out that one of the passes isn't very good. So for starters, what we need to do is we need to load up a variety of materials. So we open up our material editor by pressing M on the keyboard. Now if you click on the Get Material option, that'll bring up the material map browser, and you should have automatically the Common Lib Mat open. If not, click on this little down arrow and do Open Material, and find your way to Teleporter, Production, Assets, Other, and then it's right there. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to grab in the ambient occlusion, hatch V-Ray, hatch for glass, flat white, oops, go to a new section, transparent, and then Z depth. We're not bringing in the debug. That will just give you a kind of like a color readout between the different resolutions of the hatch effect. Not something we need right now. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to grab the glass objects, and if we take a look at our scene here, you can see it has 39 objects selected. Sometimes it's not very clear what is being selected. But one thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that these lenses are inside of that layer as well. So we're going to select Wesley's glasses, go up to Group, Open, click on the lenses, go over to our Layer Manager, select Environment Glass, and then click on the little plus sign. Now every time that we select that layer, we're going to select Wesley's glasses as well. The nice thing is that the frame and everything else can still reside underneath the original layer. Alright, so we're going to move that off to the side. And using the little script, we're going to click on Select Glass Objects. And that selects all the glass objects in the scene, including the hologram displays, his glasses, and food machine lid, and so forth. Alright, now before we go any further, we want to go up to Group, Open, not Ungroup, just Group, Open. Click on Glass Objects again, and they'll make sure we only have the glass materials or the glass objects, and not all these other groups or objects that they're associated with. Alright, so we have that selected. From our material editor, we're going to go to Global, Transparent, and then click on Assign Material to Selection. We're now going to click on Invert Selection. And, oops, before I go any further, let's just back up here a minute and go to Open. Now, the one thing that we didn't do, which we need to do, is we need to create a state or a scene state for this particular object. So let's render again really quick, just to make sure that everything is still good, because we need to get back to this state at some point. So now we can go up to Tools, Manage Scene States. That brings up this little dialog box. Click on Save, type in 01, Color. Now at any time, we can go back to this particular state. So for example, if I go back in here, 01, taking a long time to think. Alright, 01 Color. We want layer properties, materials, and environment. Nothing else really matters for these scenes. Click on Save. Now it is important that the scene is totally cleaned up before you create these states. If you move objects between layers, if you change their materials, if you do a variety of other things, you'll have to recreate these states. Alright, so now let's make sure that we go to Group, Open, click on our glass objects, go to Global Transparent, and assign it. Click on Invert. I'll select all of the opaque objects. Go over to Global Flat White and assign it to that. Now this is going to effectively make your scene or your viewport useless because everything is fully self-illuminated. But just press on and you'll be fine. Now if we render this out, it's going to be a pure white scene. But what we're doing is we're setting up the Toon Rendering pass. So if we now go up to Rendering, Environment, underneath Atmosphere, if we click on Add, V-Ray Toon, scroll down. For the normal threshold, set it to 5. If you're running at full resolution 1080p, set the pixels to 3. If you're doing a test, set it to 1. enable our tune with our little window here, and then render. Okay, so once you've gone through and set up the tune one, you need to do the same for your ambient occlusion. So once the tune is looking well, you go through and you click save and do 0 to tune. You should still have all the opaque objects selected. So you want to go through, if not, click on glass objects and then invert. Once you have the opaque objects selected, assign global ambient occlusion to those objects and do a quick test render. Looks good. So now we go back to our manage scene states, type in 03 AO. Alright, now your opaque object should still be selected. So now we want to go over to our depth and assign that to the selection. Render it out. Now there are going to be cases where you need to adjust this depth value. As you can see, there's a lot of lightness up here in front, and it doesn't actually go to full black in the back. Now we don't want it to really go to full black, but we want a better range. And so if we select our global depth, click on the little M, this will take us to our fall off map, and change the far distance to one of the values that were provided in the document. We want to be consistent with this because it'll make our lives a lot easier in post. So here we have a little bit of a better range, especially in the foreground here. Now we will be saving these as 16-bit TIFFs, so we should have some flexibility. Alright, now if we click on save for our scene states. Now you may be wondering why we didn't apply depth to the transparent objects. The reason for this is that imagine if you were looking through a glass window to an outdoor scene. If you were rendering everything with a depth value, basically the objects that hit the surface or that can be seen through the glass will get flattened to that glass. So what you need is kind of like a selective transparent element. So we're trying to figure out the best way of doing that, but these results work pretty well for stereoscopic 3D. Once we add some of the other elements, like what's shown on the screens, what's shown on the holographic displays, then we can use that for some of this depth information to make it look like it's just floating in space. Alright, so we have our depth, AO, tune, and color. Now we need to apply the hatch effect. So still with our opaque object selected, we apply global hatch. Select our glass objects, and we have a special hatch glass material for those. Do another quick render, and this is going to go through trying to render the scene. Now if you see this scene turn out kind of like an ambient occlusion but blue, that means that it cannot find the hatch texture. So go and track it down, or let me know and I'll try to help however I can. So as you can see, things are looking pretty good. If you didn't set up the character properly in terms of Turbo Smooth, the shirt, the pants, the hands, and the head are all going to look like they're way too big in terms of the hatch effect. And so you want to let this one run its course. And obviously it takes a little while, but you want to make sure that there are no objects that are going to be giving you problems. Okay, So everything is looking good. You can see it's a little dark there, but that's because the glasses receive a little bit of a hatch effect, and that is compounded with what's behind them. Okay, so that's looking good. So we can go back to our managed scene states, click save, 05, hatch. Alright, now at this point we can go back up to color, click on restore, click on restore. This will take all the objects in our scene and revert them to the original material settings. We go up to edit, select all, group, close, to kind of put everything back to where we found it. We go up to file, save, and then we're basically done. Then whenever it needs to be rendered, you would come in here to the scene states, restore one, change the resolution, change the output path, click go, and just go straight through the list. That's basically it. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to get through as many as I can. Take care.